Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Python for Beginners tutorials. In today's tutorial, we are going to look at functions. Now, before I proceed, let me say that the notebook for this tutorial, the notebook that has all the codes. Okay, the notebook is available. So if you want a short description box, you'll find the download link to get the notebook. Now, let's proceed. Now, we are going to look at function, all right? Now, before I explain what functions are and move on to the practicals itself, let's take a look at the situation here. I'll just do this first. I expect you to have your Python notebook opened. If you don't have a Python notebook, just visit the Google Colab platform, which is here. I'll leave the link to this page in the description box. I repeat, if you don't have a Python installed on your PC, just visit Google Colab. Just use this link, visit Google Colab, and then you can open a new notebook. So you can just come to File, go to click on New Notebook to open it. All right. So just use that to open your notebook. Let's wait for it to load. It should load very soon. All right, so you can open it like this and then just start typing or just do whatever you want to do. I've already covered a separate tutorial on Google Colab, so you can use that to learn how to use Google Colab to run Python codes. So just do that if you are new. All right, let's get back to my notebook here. So again, let me repeat that we are going to look at functions. I will explain the functions. I will explain the functions feature in Python, and I'm also going to give some practicals here. All right, but first, let's take a look at this problem here. Let's do a simple arithmetic. Let's say s equals 1, y equals 2. All right, I have these two. All right, let me just execute this one also. All right, now I can say x plus y. This will give me 3. All right, this is a very simple operation. All right, now this operation here, if let's say I want to repeat this again, all right, as a beginner, you may be tempted to just do a copy. Let me just do a copy and paste here for us to see. All right, so just copy and paste and then just retype everything like this. Then let's run it. So you'll get the answer, right? And if you want to change any value, you can just change it. Let's say y equals, let's say x equals 10, y equals, let's say 15, right? You can just change them like this. Let me run them. Then you can run it to get your answer, all right? Now, this is a simple program. And so if you rewrite the codes manually, that's fine. But if you have complex programs, all right, if you have complex programs like the one I've just shown, then if you want to rerun it and you decide to retype or you decide to copy and paste to a different file, that can be cumbersome and problematic. All right, and so this is where functions come in. Okay, so functions will allow you to rerun your code, it will allow you to make changes and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at what functions are and then we can start the practicals. Now, functions enable us to repeat a set of instructions multiple times, all right, on your PC. All right, so with functions, you can reuse the code many times without you having to copy them. So you don't need to copy them to different files. We are going to look at all these things. And then if there's the need to make changes in the code, it only needs to be done at one place. All right, so you just modify the function and then you can rerun it wherever you want to. That's what this statement means. Functions also allow you to use codes in multiple programs. All right, so here it's multiple times, here it's multiple programs. You can do that. It's possible to do that when you have functions. And then functions also enable us to change the input for a set of instructions. We will look at this also. And then functions also enable us to split larger problems into smaller and more manageable ones. And also functions enable us to better organize and manage our codes. All right, so as a beginner, it's important to learn what functions are because it's going to help you as you progress through the programming ladder. So how do we create functions? So if you want to create functions in Python, you first have to declare it by using the def keyword. Then this is followed by the function name. We will look at this. And then you also indicate your parentheses. Now, parameters can be added in functions. So to do that, you have to specify them within the parentheses. And then you end that line, that same line, that first line with a colon. And then subsequent lines will contain instructions that the functions should execute. Now, in functions, you create variables, obviously. These variables cannot be accessed outside the function. And so if you want to access it, you can use global variables, or you can also use the return keyword. So the return keyword is used to return the values to the caller. All right, the values or objects or whatever, you return to the caller. And the return keywords can also be used to end the execution of a function. And then the output of a function can be accessed using the return keyword. So this is just a brief explanation of what functions are in Python. All right, this can also be extended to other programming languages. It's the same concept. Now we will start a practical. So let's start the practical here, which is very important to me. So we will first start with this, a function to get the sum of two numbers. We earlier on started with this. This is a warm-up, so we are going to extend it here in a function. So it will allow me to show you how functions are created. All right. So if you want to create a function, you start with your def keyword, and then you specify your function name. So I will say compute sum. So the name here, we can use it this way. You can also use a single word. You can even use uppercase compute sum. I mean, the name, it's up to you. So just use an appropriate name. That's what I'll say. But for now, I'll just use this one here. Compute sum. So this is the name of the function, and then you bring your parentheses. And then you end the line with a colon. And then the subsequent lines, you will specify the instructions that you want to execute. So let's start with our sum. So I'll say s equals 1, y equals 2. And then I'll say result equals x plus y. I'll say print results. So this becomes our function, right? So after that, you just run it. Yeah, and by the way, anyway, I'll talk about that later. So this is how you write your functions. So if you want to execute your function, let me just add that point here. I think it's important so that when you are reading, you get it. So to execute a function, you call it by its name, right? And then you add additional information where necessary. All right, so I'll just put this there. Of course, we are going to look at how to do that here, right? So now we have created a function. So how do we call that function? So to call it, you specify the name. So we say compute sum, and then you bring your parentheses like this. So this is how we call a function. All right. So if you execute it, everything in that function will be executed. If you call the function, let me just put it that way. If you call the function, all the codes, all the instructions in that function will be executed. So s plus 1, no, x equals 1, yeah. So s equals 1, y equals 2, result equals x plus y, print results. So this is a typical function. This is a simple function, a simple program, right? So as a beginner, this should help you get started with how to create functions. It's very, very simple and straightforward. So once you get the basics, it becomes easy for you to add on. All right. Now let's do this. Let's proceed. You can create another function. Okay, let's just create another one for those who want to do more. Let's say def say hello. I can say print hello world. All right, like this. And then I'll call it, I'll say hello. So this has printed the hello world function. So this is also another function. So functions basically allow us to execute codes in an organized manner. All right. So this is a typical function. Now this tutorial is made for beginners, so I'm going to explain a couple of things. I repeat, this tutorial has been made for beginners. I'm going to explain a couple of things, but as you advance, there are things you can also add, which I'll talk about later on. All right. Now let's look at this. This function we created, this one here, it's already had the information in it. So we just call it and then we execute the commands. This one already has the information, so we just call it and we execute the command. All right. In real world situations, it's not every time that you have your values ready or available. All right. And so there could be times where you want to change the inputs in a function. So for example, here the inputs were x and y, or maybe x, depending on how you want it to be. All right. So we are going to create another scenario here, so that I'll use that to show you how to change the inputs in a function. All right. Let me just do this. Let's just say, let me use this one here. Let me just edit this one here. This one rather. So change the inputs in a function slash, or let's say, or I think I will modify it here, slash accepting inputs in a function, right? So we will do it this way. Let me just do it this way. All right. So if we want to accept inputs, then we have to add what you call parameters. All right. So that means we have to add parameters. Let me just add that here. By adding parameters, there's a comment. Remember, I made a statement here. Parameters may be added to the function. This should be written within the parentheses. So parameters allow us to specify inputs and then change them as we want. All right. So we are going to do something here. So we have this function here. Now, let's say this x, instead of 1, we want to make it 2, or we want to make it 3, depending on the situation. The same with y. All right. We have to specify that here, and then we can always call the function and then specify the values. All right. Let's do this. Now let's come back here. Let's say def create, not create, let's use this one. Let's say def compute sum, or let's say compute two numbers. Let's use it this way. And then we bring our parentheses. You can also bring our colon. All right. So here, because we are going to specify two inputs, these are parameters. And so in the parentheses, here's what we do. You say A, B. Note that the A and then B are placeholders. You can use any name of your choice. You can even say num1, num2. It still works. You just have to be consistent. So whether it's A or B or X and Y, it doesn't matter. Any of them will work. Just put in the right placeholders of your choice. Let's go to the next line. So now we can say result equals A plus B. Then we can say print results like this. So let's execute this command. Perfect, that has been done. So here, if you call the function, let's say compute two numbers, let's call it this way. If you call it this way, you are going to get an error. There will be an error message. It says missing two required positional arguments, A and B. All right, so these are the arguments. All right. Now, if you are calling the function and then you are supposed to supply information, that information becomes arguments. But if you are creating it, then they are parameters. Just take note of that. Okay, so don't let this confuse you. If you are creating it, A and B are parameters that you are adding. But if you are calling the function, then they become arguments. So take note of that. All right. So here it says missing two required positional arguments, A and B. All right. It's because these are placeholders. And so we are expected to specify values for them. That's A and B. And all of them should be specified. If you even say compute, let's just use it here. This should be fine. If say compute two numbers and we say 10 and we run it, we are still going to get an error. Now it says missing one required positional argument. So if you create your functions in this format, if it's 10 parameters you specify, you should supply information for all the 10. All right, and I will show you how to also modify this to be flexible. So the right thing to do is to call. So we say compute two numbers and we can say 10, 5. So let's execute this command. So that now we have 15. You can also change the number if it's 1 and 4. You can rerun it to get your answer. All right, let's just do a copy and paste here. Now it's straightforward. Let's say 6 and 5 like this. So let's execute it. This gives us 11. So now you see that it's now flexible. We can change the values as we please. Unlike the first one here where everything was fixed, here it's now possible to change the values as we please. Okay, so that's where functions come in handy. If let's say you have a program, you are doing some operations and then the values may be changing, okay, in different situations, then if you have your function designed like this, A and B, then whenever the value changes, you just compute it and then you get your answer. It's that simple. All right. So if let's say you are using calculators, okay, to compute your values, then behind the scenes, some of these things have been implemented that allow you to change the values as you please, and then that information is computed. Okay, so this is the power of functions. All right, now let's do this. Let's look at this. Sometimes too, you would want to set default values in a function. That means that if you don't specify any value, those values should be used. It's also possible to do that. All right, so we are going to do that here. Let's just come to this one here. So now let's use multiplication. Let's say def multiply. All right. Now, if you want to set default values, then there are a couple of ways you can go about it. So you can do this. You can say so I am going to type it again. So I'll say def multiply, and so you can add default values and non-default values. All right, so let's just say the first value is compulsory and the second one we have a default value. All right, so we can say a command, we can say b equals 5. All right, and let's multiply. Let's correct it. So it's multiply like this. Let me just go over again. That will be better. So multiply, and then I'll bring my parentheses and I'll bring my colon. All right. So now we have to specify the default value. So in a function, you can have both default values and then values that are required, okay, mandatory ones. All right. So if you're going to combine them, all right, now for those that are mandatory, that are compulsory, you bring them first. For example, let's say A, you always have to specify this value, and then those that have default values, comma, you say B equals, let's say 5. All right, so we have A and then B equals 5. That means that A should always be specified. I repeat, what we have here means that A should always be specified, and then B, you can choose to leave it. When you leave it, then the default value of 5 will be used. I repeat, A, you always have to specify. B, you can leave it. If you leave it out, if you don't specify it, then the default value 5 will be used. All right, let me just go once again. For this format, okay, what we have here, A is compulsory, you have to specify it. B, you can leave it. If you leave it out, if you don't specify it, the default value of 5 will be used. That is what this means. All right, now let's add the rest of the codes. So I can say, let's say, result equals, let's say, A star 5. Let's use this. So that means A star 5. Or yeah, let's use B rather. Right? We want the placeholder. I want you to have a feel of the function. So A star B. Right? Let's do it this way. All right. So if you have it this way, let's say print. You can say print results. We can also say print A star B, but let's use this one here. Let's execute it. Now, if I call this function multiply, A should be specified, so I can say 2. And then B, I can leave it. So if I run it, I'll get 10 because even though I did not specify a value for B, the default is 5. So that is what will be used. Now, let's say multiply. I can say 2, I can say, let's say 7. Let's run this. Okay. Now here, we have this error because there was a typo here. Okay. So this also to let you know that Python is case sensitive. So sometimes if you have some of these errors, here it says multiple is not defined. So because it's multiple not defined, you have to backtrack and look at your entries and see if you really have a function with this name or there's something similar. All right. So I'll correct it. I'll say multiply, then I'll say 2, 7. Now I'm going to run it. All right. Now it's done. It's perfect. Okay, let's just do it again. Let me do it again. So I'll say multiply, then 2, 7, and I'm going to run it. Perfect. So we have it 14. So again, you can also do this. You can say multiply 2, and I can say B equals, let's say 8. Okay, so for the default values, because we specify it this way, you can just use the value itself, or you can specify the placeholder itself here. Okay, so that can be done. So you can do it this way. We can execute it. So when you execute it, you have 16. You can also try with others. That's also fine. Okay, so this is how we do it. Okay, so we have set default values. You can also set default values for both. So if, let's say, you want to set default values for A and then B, you can just call your function, or you can create it. Let's just redo it again here. Let's say multiply 2. You can say A equals, let's say 2, like this. So both have default values. So you can just say multiply 2. This will run. You can also say multiply, let's say 3, 6. This will run. You can also say multiply A equals 4, B equals 6 or 7 or whatever, let's say 10. And then you can also run it. That will also give you an answer. So we have different variations here. All right. So this is how we set default values and non-default values in a function. Okay. So there are other things you can also do, but we will talk about that later on. All right. Now you will see that for these functions we created, we had fixed numbers of arguments, or let's say fixed numbers of inputs. All right. So it's possible that in your programs you may have you may not know, all right, or the exact number of arguments may not be known, or the exact number of inputs may not be known. So it's possible to use some other codes to make it more flexible. We will talk about that later on. But for now, I want us to look at this first. We'll come back to what I just made mention of. Let's take a look at this one here, accessing variables / objects in a function. Okay, so here we have this one here. It says approach 1, using global variables. Approach 2, using the return keyword. So I want us to take a look at this one here because it's also important. Now let's start with this one here. Let me just do this. Let's create this problem. I'll use the sum. Let me just use this one here. I'll just use this one. I'll create this problem so that you get a gist of what I'm talking about. So let's do this. We have this function, right? Let's run it. Now let's compute it. We are calling the function. Let's call it. Now let's say you have this variable. This is the results. All right. Now let's say in your code, in your program, you would want to use this result for another activity, for another operation, for another computation. Now, if you type results, let's see. It says what? Result is not defined. But we have this function, it has the variable result in it. So why? This is because variables by default are not accessible outside the functions in which they were created. So that is why here it says result is not defined. All right. So that's where the two strategies come in. So if you want to access a variable in a function, you can use global variables, or you can also use the return keyword to return the value for you. And advanced users, when you are creating classes, you can also have a way to deal with that situation, but that's for advanced learners. So classes, I'll treat that separately. So for now, let's just look at this approach. So approach 1, using global variables. So I will still do this. I will still reuse the same function again, and this time I'll show you what the global variable is. All right. Let's say compute sum 2. I mean, the name is up to you. So this is a time to be creative and then just go all out with experiments. All right. These codes, nothing will happen to your computer. So just modify them as you see fit. Now you can do this. You can make this result a global variable. So you can say global results. So before you make it a global variable, you need to declare it. So global variables are accessed globally. Yeah, so just like the word global, right? When we say global, that means you can access it everywhere in the program. You can access it in and outside your function. You can access it in other functions as well. Right? So if you have 10 functions, if you declare a variable in this function as global, you can access that variable in another function as well. We will look at that here. Now let's look at this. All right. Now if I run this, let me run it. If I say compute sum 2, I'll get my results all right. I can also query for the results, and I'll get it here because it's global. I've made it global. So this is one way to access functions. Sorry, this is one way of accessing variables in a function. Now let's do this. Let's create another function. Let's say def. Let's say def dummy. So let's do this. Let's say print results. Yes. Let's execute this function. Let's say dummy. All right. Now you see that this results, we did not create any variable called result in this function. But because this is global, we're able to access it in this function as well. All right. So this is how we do it. But then there's another strategy, another option, another approach. Let me just put it that way, which uses what you call the return keyword. Okay, so I prefer to use that one because sometimes if you have a global variable like maybe the variable name, you may be using it in a different function, but for a different purpose. So if it's global here, that means it can mess up the code. So I will prefer to use the return keyword. So return keyword, the return keyword here returns the variable to you, the value or the object to you, to the user, to the caller. Let me just put it that way. So let's look at that approach so that you understand what I'm saying. You still use the same compute or let's say def return text. Let's just use this one now. It's simple. We just do it this way. Let's just say let's just see, yeah, let's do this. Let's see first name, last name. Let's do it this way. And then when we come here, you can see, or actually I think the math will be better. Let's do that first and then we come to the strings because that one is straightforward. So I'll still use the sum. So I'll say def compute sum 3. Let's do it this way. So I'll say A, B. This time let's make them compulsory. I'll say result equals A plus B. Right. Now, if you want to access the results, the sum, you can say return results. Now let's execute this. Let's create a function. So let's call it. So let's say compute sum 3. Let's say 2 plus 3 or 2 plus 4, whatever. Let's run it. If you run it like this, you are going to get your 6. But then if let's say you want to use the results, the value, the sum in another operation, then you have to assign the entire function. Okay, after calling, you have to assign to another variable. So I can say results. You can use any name of your choice. You can say result or you can use any name. That's also fine. Or you can even say, let's say, sum of numbers equals compute sum 3 to 4. Let's use this one here. So for this one, if you run it, you will not get any output because the operation, the result has been assigned to this variable. So you can just call this variable. So you can say sum of numbers. When you run it, you will get your answer. So it's very, very simple. All right. So this also allows you to call a function in another function and then get the results. All right. It's something that we'll cover in another tutorial. So it's possible to also do that. All right. All right. So these are the two approaches that you can use to access variables. Okay. So the return keyword can be used to return or obtain the objects that have been created in a function, like in this situation. All right. So Python is a cool programming language. It's easy to learn. It's easy to understand. All right. So let's proceed. Now let's do this. Let's look at this. Now it's time to write a program. So we are going to do this. Here we are going to write a function to read CSV files and return the size of the data. That's what we are going to do. All right. So let's do this. I want you to make sure you have installed Pandas, but if you have not installed it, you can still use the Google Colab platform. It already has Pandas installed. So we are going to use Pandas to read CSV files. I have some CSV files here that we are going to use. So I want you to use Pandas to read the CSV files. So now here, you don't need to download the files. Right? We are going to use the download links. All right, so you don't need to download the files yourself. Just use the links. Pandas will take care of the rest. So let's do this. First of all, let's just create our normal code. Let's say import pandas as PD. Let's do it this way. All right. Let's just import pandas. And then let's come here. Now I'm going to open each of them in a separate tab so that we can get the links. And by the way, the link to this page is in the description box. I repeat, the link to this page is in the description box. And I also place the links to these files in the description box. So you can use any approach to get the links. It's the download links that we want, right? So let me open this other one too. So I have the two of them open. Okay, so this is one of them. So this one, for example, if you want to get a link, you come to raw, right click, and then go to copy link. That will give you the link. All right. Now let's come here. Now I'm going to put in link 1. All right. And I'm going to also do same for link 2. So link 2 will be the other file, which is this one here. So right click and go to copy link. Right, so these are the links. So I have them here. Okay. Now in pandas, if you want to read a CSV file, you can say df equals pd.read CSV, and you specify the file. But this time, instead of the file, we are using the download link. So I can say link 1. All right. So this will read the file for me, or the CSV file. This is link 1. Okay. Now let's do this. So the file is being read. Okay. Now let's just say you have read the file. Right. Now, if you want to get the size of the data, I mean, this is the data, you can just say df.shape. So we have 768 samples, then 9 columns or 9 features. All right. So we have that here. Okay. So if let's say you have multiple CSV files and you want to read, then there's where functions come in. So let's do this. So we can say def, you can say read CSV, or just any, let's just use it, let's say read CSV like this. And then you can now say link. You bring your colon, the next line, and say df equals pd.read CSV. You say link. So the link here is a placeholder. Notice that here I did not specify 1 and 2. This is a placeholder that we will use to accept inputs. Now you can say size equals df.shape. And now we can say return size. Now I want us to behave like experts. We will use this one here. We are now professional, right? So I'll execute this function. And now when I come here, if I'm calling it, I'll say read CSV, and then I can say link 1, right? So if I read it, then I'll get it here. If I want to assign to a variable, I can just add that here and say maybe data1 size. Then I'll just do a copy and paste now. I'll just copy and paste it here. So I'll run it. All right, so that has been done. So I can now say data1 size. All right. Now, if I want to read the second file, I don't need to retype the codes. All that I have to do, I'll just say data2 size equals read CSV. I'll say link 2 by this, and I'll execute it. So if I do it, then I can just say data2 size to get it here. So here is 220734, right? Now we have been keeping it simple, but if you have lots of entries, if you have lots of records, then it's advisable to use loops to iterate and then get your results. So for loops, I've covered them in another tutorial. So if you want to have a look at how to use loops, then check the description, you'll find the link to that video. Anyway, we will try something here. I think it's better I let you have a feel of what loops are first, and then you can later watch that other video. All right, so we'll do more of loops later on. Okay, so there's a function to read CSV fast and return the size of the data. All right, so let's do this. So if let's say we had lots of links, maybe I can say maybe links equals, I'm using a list here, so I can say list one, no, not list, yes, link one, link two. So this is a list. So there's a list which has two links. All right. So for list, I've also covered that in detail in another tutorial. So if you're interested to learn what lists are, check the description box. You'll find a link to that video. So that we have that here, links. So now if I want to use a loop, I can say for link in links. I bring my colon. Then now I can say side equals CSV link. The next line I can say print size, like this. So let's run this command. If I do it this way, this is what will happen. You have the size being displayed for you. So this is one of them, and then the other one is also going to be displayed for you. So we have both of them here. You can also modify it and even see data size like this, and then you can run it. So let's run it. So once you do that, you have it here. So you can add your special labels as well if you had, just to make it more organized. Let me just put it that way. So this a typical way to use loops to run your functions and then specify your inputs and then process your data. All right, now let's proceed. Now let's take a look at this. So adding a variable number of arguments. Okay, now let's go back to the compute sum. Let's use this one here. This is simple. Or let's use this one here. I think this one is better. I think I'll use the original one. This one here. I want us to look at something here. Let's do this. I'll come back to this title, by the way, but I want us to look at this problem first. Okay. Now this time, let me just do this. Let's see. I'll do it this way. I'll just say result equals A plus B. Correct. A, B. Print results. Now, if you take a look at this program here, we have already defined the number of inputs. All right. So if I call it, I always have to specify 2. So let's say A 5 and then B 6. Okay, we can run it, get our results. Now let's say compute sum 5, 6, let's say 9. What happens? If I do it this way, it says 5, 6, 9. It says compute sum takes 2 position arguments, but 3 were given. Because when I was defined a function, I gave 2. So whenever you call it, you're supposed to supply 2 arguments. But in some cases, you may not know how many variables you have, or you may not know how many numbers you are going to compute the sum for. All right, so that means that the arguments will be variable. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So for that one, if you have a situation like that, then Python also allows you to deal with that by using the star ax and the star ax. Okay, so we are going to look at how to use these two strategies to also specify a variable number of arguments. That's what we are going to do next. So let's take a look at it. Let's start with the star ax. Okay, so star ax is used to specify non-keyword arguments. And then star quacks is used to specify keyword arguments. So non-keyword arguments here, these are arguments that do not have identifiers, right? So if you want to just process them wholesale, if you want to do a batch processing where you don't really care about the identifiers or don't really care about a particular value, then you can use the star ax. The star quacks is used to specify keyword arguments. So for that approach, if you want to add identifiers to your argument, if you want to track the arguments, the inputs, maybe there are some input that you want, there are some inputs with particular labels that you want, then you can use the star quacks to do that. All right. So we are going to look at both examples here. So let's just start with the star ax example. Now let's do this. Let's just do it here. Let's say def compute sum. Let's say sum 4. Let's say AB. There's the initial one. Or we can even just say star ax. I think this will be better for now. So if you don't know the number of arguments we are going to specify, right? If you don't know the number of inputs, then you can use the star ax, for example, this one here. So once I'm done, I'll bring my colon, and then let's start with it. Let's just say print ax. Let's leave it this way. We will come back to the sum. For now, I just want us to do a build up. Let's do this. So let's run this, and then let's say compute underscore sum 4. Let's say 1 2. Now we are just printing it. Okay, now let's just say 6. Right, so here you notice we don't have any error. Okay, but if we had used this approach, then we will have error because here we defined it. We made an explicit declaration here that we want 2 arguments. We want 2 inputs. But here we are saying star. So the star here is indicating that we want everything all. So star ax. Okay, so that is why here you can increase it to whatever number you want, and then there will be no error. And so this gives you that flexibility. So now if I want to compute the sum, let's just come back here. Let's do this. If I want to compute the sum, now I'll just say result equals sum ax. Okay, so whatever you have here is a tuple. All right, so tuple is also another data type, and I'll cover that in another video, but I'll also leave some resources you can use to read more about tuples. So you can say sum is a keyword in Python, by the way, to get sum, right? And I can just say let's just print it results. Now run it. All right, so there's still compute 4. So now if I come, I say compute sum 4 1 2, I get 3. I can add 7, that give me 10. I can add 20. The list goes on and on. All right, so this one, it's unlimited. So this gives you that flexibility to enter as many arguments as you want, okay, to meet your needs. So this is one approach. So here we are using non-keyword argument because we don't want to give identifiers to the inputs, the arguments. We don't, that's why they are called non-keywords. All right, so we don't need to give any identifiers to them. So whereby you can say A equals B or C equals D or whatever. We don't need to do that here. All right, so this is a typical scenario of non-keyword arguments. All right, so we can't identify them, we just print them straight away, and then that is it. So that is for the non-keyword arguments. Okay, now let's proceed. Sometimes you want to track your arguments, you'd want to give identifiers. All right. So that is used if, let's say, some of the inputs will be processed differently from others. Then you can use the keyword arguments and then you can specify those ones. So the keyword arguments are going to be like tags, okay, tags or labels or identifiers, so that you can use that to separate, or let's say to identify the inputs and then process them according to what you want. Now let's take a typical scenario. Let's do this. I think this will be better. Let's just say that this time we are going to use strings. Let's say def gets fruits, or let's say fruit counts. Let's say star facts. All right. Now we have this. So let's just say in this function, what you want is to get the number of bananas. Now when you come here, you can just say number of bananas equals, and then here when you come, you will say quacks.get. You say banana. All right. Then you can print, let's say bananas. Bring this comma, you can see number of bananas like this. So here, don't worry, we will go through them. So the star quacks used to specify this. So here, if you want to get a value, you just need to supply any name, okay, that you think you are going to supply, and then it will be indicated for you. Now let's execute this function. Now if I say get fruit counts like this, when I call that function, I can say banana equals 5. I can say apple equals 10. Now if I run it, I get bananas 5. All right. So here we are specifying a variable number of arguments, but then what we want is bananas. All right. What we want is bananas, and so that means that we don't need to predefine it here. We can just put it here, and then just when we are calling the function, we can specify it. Or even if someone doesn't call, even if someone calls the function and does not specify bananas, that means that there's no banana at that moment. Right. So let's even do this. Let's clear this. Let's say we are using apple. I think I will do it in another line. That will be better. Let's just call this again. Let's just call it. And this time, let's remove banana. Now if I run it, it says bananas is none. All right, so that means that that particular user does not have any banana. There's no record for banana, and so it's none. Right, so this also allows you to keep track of your stuffs. Right, so if someone doesn't specify anything, then you can catch it here and then just process whatever you have. And so with the get fruit count, it's also possible to specify apple or oranges or whatever using the star quacks. Okay, so star quacks is used if you want to specify keyword arguments. So these keywords will be used to identify those arguments, and then you can process that information. All right, so that's how we do it. So this is the power of function in Python. All right, so that's it. So again, let me say that if you want the notebook, let me just clear it. If you want the notebook, chat description box, you'll find the download link to the notebook. And if you also want to support this channel, then you're always welcome. There's a link that you can use to buy me a coffee and stuff like that. So chat description box, you'll find links to more Python tutorials. So I'll be making more content, so just make sure to come back And then if you have any comments, or if you think there's something that can be improved about this video, I repeat, if you think there's something that can be improved about this video, then I will encourage you to put it in the comment section so that I can implement it in the next video. So I'll see you in the next session.